some fat. Mix it, knead it, let rest or rise.
So for this next recipe for the bread recipe project, we gotta scald some milk. 2 cups of milk, I'm scalding it. So before we add our other ingredient, because we're going to add 2 more ingredients, well, 3 more ingredients to this. Now that our milk is scalded, we're going to add a tablespoon of sugar. Yep, tablespoon of sugar. And we got to let this cool down, which it shouldn't take that long because it is raining outside and storming outside. So, which I didn't get all my feeding done for this morning. So, now we're going to let this cool down before we add our yeast. So, now that our milk sugar mixture has cooled down a little bit, we're going to add our yeast. And that's 1 package of yeast to this. And let it set for a few minutes. And I will be transferring this to a different bowl after it sets for a few minutes. So, let it good and let the yeast bloom or whatever you want to call it. So now, according to the recipe, it says to make it like a sponge, like you would for bread. So to my understanding, what I Googled, yeah, I did Google, you add about half of the flour to it. So I'm going to add about a cup of the flour. Then we're going to mix this in and then slowly add the rest of the flour, and then we're going to let it rise like a sponge, I guess. Get this flour like absorbed in this yeast milk mixture. Basically, you want it bubbly like a pancake mixture, from what I read. So I'm going to add the rest of the flour to this. And that is 2.5 cups of flour. Sifted flour. Now, we will be adding more flour later. Just, we got to let this rest after we get this all mixed up. So this says to cover it. Basically, you're going to cover it and let it rise until light. I'm just going to cover it and let it rise. What I think is, with it risen, this bread will rise 3 times. This is the first one. So now that our dough is risen, we've added a 1/2 cup of sugar, a teaspoon of salt. We're going to add 2 eggs that have been beaten lightly to this. Let me get the other ingredients real quick. Also add 1/2 cup of cocoa and 3 tablespoons of melted butter to this. I'm going to mix this up before we add our flour. It says to add the flour last, so we're going to add 4 cups of flour, and it says it will be a stiff dough. So there is 1 cup. This is a very stiff dough. At the end, I did get my hands in there and kind of kneaded it a little bit, even though it didn't say to do that. So now we got to cover it and let it double in bulk again. Now the recipe says to divide, well, got to divide it anyway, but we're going to put this in 2 greased bread pans. So I am going to use my bench scraper and cut it in half, like so. And then we're going to put it in my 2 buttered bread pans, greased bread pans, and then we're going to let it rise again. So hopefully this one will work. Now we're going to bake the bread for an hour at 350 degrees. This is the first pan. which may have doubled in size a little bit, but we'll go with it.